Okay, students, welcome back to History of the World in 2 hours. I hope you've enjoyed the last segment that we watched because this is starting to get really exciting. Up until this point that you watched yesterday and that you filled in the worksheet for right here, we've had a lot of science. We've talked about the moon, and we've talked about the sun, and talked about coal and atoms, and those things are certainly interesting, but they're not our specialty in social studies. So now we are moving ahead to the social studies aspect of things. Today we get on the geohistogram. Well, in yesterday's video we got on the geohistogram, but today the review of this sheet, we're noticing that we are now having larger groups of organized people living together. And that's the exciting part of social studies. So let's go ahead and take an examination of our answers from what we found out yesterday and go ahead and correct our work. So please have this part of your worksheet out. Remember, this is not just a worksheet, it is a study guide for your upcoming test on this movie. So please have this out and make sure you have a pencil so you can make corrections along the way. Before we get into the actual answers, I do want to point out that they ended the last segment with fire, and we were talking about how fire is a game changer, and we're talking about how fire allowed allowed people to make clay, to make metals, and to have engines. So we wanted to make sure that we really acknowledge fire. It's not on your study guide, but certainly something unique to Earth compared to the other planets and essential for human advancement. So, and also the part about fire that we didn't talk about much or at all, is how we can cook food, and that allows our bodies to utilize the energy better and gives us additional energy. So that's a pretty cool fact as well. Okay, so moving to the actual study guide, I'm going to do the same thing I did last time, and I'm going to go ahead and just show you where you should be writing so you can make sure you're adding in the correct answers in the correct spots. So it says 200,000 years before present. Human voice box evolves/descends, and now humans have the ability to make more complex sounds, leading to oral communication. Boys and girls, I talk about how this separates us from other beings, other creatures, other animals. We are now able to share information. We can talk about things with other people in our group, and we can say, hey, don't go down by that valley. That's where Cousin Ben got eaten alive by a saber tooth the other day. So we can communicate with our other people in our group, and we can let them know things that are good and bad, and that, of course, leads us to a better lifestyle. Next one. 100,000 years ago, man migrates out of the blank continent. African continent. We have scientific evidence of fossils being found in Africa and then dating along the way into different directions. Now, don't worry, we'll get into that in more detail as the year progresses, and we'll show some patterns of fossil evidence coming out of Africa. But for right now, just remembering that we know that man migrated out of Africa. Okay, the next one down. Blank of the land and earth can be reached by foot. The answer there is half. Half of the land on earth can be reached by foot. So if you need a moment to fill that stuff in, go ahead. If you need to stop it and ask a friend, go ahead. The next section here was a comparison of scale. What they're saying in this little section here is they're trying to get you to understand that humans have been on Earth and a part of Earth for a very, very short amount of time. When we compare how long Earth has been around, 14 billion years, humans are the smallest blip on that whole scale. So they're just putting this to you in a way that can help you maybe imagine how little bit of time humans have been on Earth and in this universe. So this says the Earth has existed the last 5 years in comparison to the solar system. Large complex creatures emerged 7 months ago. Dinosaurs became extinct 3 weeks ago. Recorded human history has been the last 3 minutes. And modern society began 6 seconds ago. Boys and girls, these numbers are staggering because it just shows us how little humans have been part of this solar system. But it's really interesting to think about. And it's also interesting to think about how well we have done in that time frame. Humans have really made lots of advancements in that short of a time period. And it's pretty interesting to think about how complex we are. I'm just going to read through this again so you have this correct. The Earth has existed the last 5 years. Large, complex creatures emerged 7 months ago. Dinosaurs became extinct 3 weeks ago. Recorded human history has been the last 3 minutes, and modern society began 6 seconds ago. We're still not on the geohistogram, boys and girls. We're 12,000 years before present, and we know the geohistogram starts not quite. So the geohistogram really only covers about 9,000 years or so, and we're 12,000 years before present. So humans are still around and they're doing their thing, but they're not living in larger groups. They're not living in civilizations, and they're not living in empires. So that's what we need to recognize for this part. And don't worry, again, we're going to study this stuff in a little more detail later on. So we will have additional information to go on. This is just a preview to get you thinking about these things. So, okay, right here, 12,000 years before present. I want you to go ahead and make sure you have the blank created land bridges and helped man spread around the world. That would be the Ice Age. Boy, I would have hated to have lived in the Ice Age. I'm always cold anyways, but brutal circumstances. At least for me. Maybe you would have liked it. The Ice Age allows the land bridges to form, and we'll talk about that in much bigger detail later. It's too much to talk about now, but it allows man to go around the world because there are bridges made of ice. So we will cover that later. Also, let's see, it says, rather than die off, humans have adapted, which is, of course, one of the stellar things about humans is that we can make changes and we can adjust to our circumstances. You know what? Okay. Did I say adapted? Rather than die off, humans have adapted. Yes. Okay. So adapted. Adapted means adjusted. I know that's been a trigger word for kids in the past. They don't understand that. So the correct word is adapted, which means to adjust, change. Then the last thing here, it says grass is the unheralded hero of human history. So grass, once again, we're talking about grass. Why? Because it was food. People are able to understand how to grow food and store it and then use it for a whole year. And they talk about that in detail in the movie. Well, not detail, but a little overview of how they had to be able to grow food and then store it. And then in addition to that, they had to keep track of it. And they talked about how that encourages then things like writing, armies, and leadership. So that comes from being able to grow grasses and hold on to them and then have people starting to live in groups. Oh my gosh, speaking of living in groups, look, we're 6,000 years before present. Let me jump over to the geohistogram. We are now in this area, boys and girls. I want to show you. Check this out. We are in this area for the geohistogram. We're going to talk about these areas. Sumer and Indus River Valley. Super interesting places, very advanced for their time. I think you're going to find it super interesting, and I can't wait to start talking about those civilizations. But back to the checking our work right here. 6,000 years before present, centers of power and innovation appear, especially in the Fertile Crescent. I just showed you that in the geohistogram. Can you imagine power and innovation? things were developing and they had technologies and they were making inventions. It's really an impressive time period, and I can't wait to show you guys about that. Some of these Sumerian centers in Mesopotamia can be called our first cities. So right here we would want to add in cities. We're going to, they talk about in the movie, and we're going to talk about this too. For example, they had the city of, which one was it? Oh, Ulrich. That was 1 square mile. And they talked about how 5,000 people lived in 1 square mile. That's because they could grow grasses and keep grain for a year, and they could feed the people in that small area for a given time. Before that, that type of an area would have only been able to service a few people because they would have had to hunt and gather, and they would have needed that full 1 square mile for hunting and gathering for just a few people. So times are changing, things are getting much, much different. 5,000 people are living where previously only a few would have been able to have been supported, and that is because humans are growing grass, they're harvesting it, and they're keeping it. So it's pretty cool. And we'll talk more about that later. Okay, so now we're down to 5,000 years before present, and we're definitely on the geohistogram. We're already talking about Mesopotamia and the Sumerians. And so now it says civilizations are about to take off, but they must master trade first. I'm wondering, what do you think is so important about trade? Why is trade so important? What could possibly be so crazy about trade? Think about that for a second. Maybe ask a neighbor, what is so important about trade? I bet you have a lot of ideas. If you want to pause and share out, that's fine. So trade, we will get into again a lot later, a little bit more detail than we are today. But I want you just to be thinking about trade. And it says the donkey becomes the key to trade. The donkey, I love that. Donkey is the key to trade. He becomes very important. Without the donkey, things don't happen. His first link to globalization. And we have computers now. The donkey was the computer of its time. Super cool. And what are we doing when we trade? Think about that. We're trading ideas. We're trading goods. Well, we might be trading some diseases as well, but that's a side note. So positive things like different ways of doing things and different goods come through trade. That extends our minds, that gets ideas going, and things just blossom from there. Such a cool thing that humans have done. By 2000 BC, massive monuments such as the pyramids, Stonehenge, and ziggurats are being built. I still don't understand those pyramids and how they possibly did that. That just makes me, I don't know, amazed that they could do that without the technology. I mean, no cranes, no big machinery. So cool. But we'll talk about that later. The ziggurats is a religious reference. We'll be talking about those. And then Stonehenge, we don't talk about much, but you probably are familiar with it because it's talked about in regular everyday life. So there we go for our corrected work for today. If you don't have those answers, if you need more time, you can let me know. You can replay this video later on. You can email me, whatever works for you. Right now, what I want to do is go and show you the last part. So today you're going to watch the next segment and then fill in the last part of your note-taking sheet. So today you're going to go ahead and read through a new sheet. I'm going to get it out for you and show you. Then you'll fill that in. That will be your last note-taking sheet in the last part of the movie. You're probably a little sad to see the last part of the movie. I know I was, but so many cool things with humans comes in this next segment. You will just be amazed at how much we've advanced in the last thousands of years. Okay, let's see. So boys and girls, this is the last note-taking sheet that you have. Oh boy. Let's just unzoom that a little bit here. Okay, so this is what it looks like. Here we go. I'll just scooch it over a little bit, or I won't so much. There we go. So this part of the worksheet talks about the world geohistogram. Because we are unable to have, Each one of you have your own paper copy at this time. You're going to have to do your best on this. Don't fret about it. Perhaps when the movie's over today, you can go to your chapter 1 book where we've gone before, and you can click on that geohistogram and do your best to figure these out. We'll also talk about them together. So go ahead and try your best on these, but you'll need to go into chapter 1 and use your geohistogram in chapter 1 because we don't have paper copies available for everyone. This is 2,000 years before present. Well, we're getting really close to what we know and things that we recognize. 500 years, 300, and then the 20th century. So as usual, you can have this out. I know that my students prefer to just listen to the video and then fill it in after the video is done and do their best in that way, and then listen for the recap the next day. So we will correct these tomorrow. So if you miss something, it's okay. I want you to concentrate on listening to the whole video. And thank you, teachers, for playing the next section of the video, and we will see you back tomorrow to look these over and discuss the end of this movie. Hope you enjoy it. Have a good day.